Gianna skillfully packed her travel bag while her husband lounged on the couch, unwinding after a long day at work. "It's a shame, really, that we couldn't go on this trip together," she lamented, "but perhaps we'll have the opportunity in the future." Gianna had decided to embark on this vacation with her dear friend Camilla. Due to conflicting schedules, her husband couldn't take time off at the same time as her. Eager for a much-needed break, Gianna wasted no time in persuading Camilla to join her. Asher's job had been tumultuous in recent months, with several specialists leaving, and the workload being redistributed among those who remained. Hiring new staff was a slow process, leaving them with no choice but to soldier on. Taking a vacation seemed out of the question at the moment. However, Gianna wasn't easily disheartened by such circumstances. She possessed a resilient spirit and promptly sought solutions to any obstacles that came her way. Without delay, she and Camilla selected a hotel and secured their tickets. The days zipped by in a blur. It seemed like only moments had passed. Asher kept in constant communication with his wife every day, which helped bridge the gap of distance between them. His busy schedule at work also kept his mind occupied. Upon Gianna's return, the couple decided to indulge in a celebratory dinner at a local eatery, toasting to their reunion. Asher couldn't help but notice that Gianna appeared sun-kissed, utterly rejuvenated, and more laid back than usual. Clearly, the holiday had done wonders for her. A week swiftly returned them to their routine. Gianna resumed her job, which meant that the couple's interactions were confined to brief mornings and evenings. Then, one day, Asher finished his work early and found himself at their apartment door earlier than usual. As he fished out his keys, a voice unexpectedly broke his concentration. Turning around, his eyes popped in astonishment at the sight of a young man holding an enormous bouquet of flowers. "Hi, is this apartment number 50? I have a beautiful bouquet here for Gianna. Do you mind if I give it to you?" he asked. Puzzled, Asher took a bouquet of snow-white lilies and headed inside. Just as he was rummaging through the flowers in search of a note, Gianna herself returned home. "It looks like the courier delivered you a bouquet," her husband remarked, watching her reaction. For a moment, he thought Gianna recognized the sender. However, her surprise was the same as his when she considered the unexpected surprise. It must be some kind of confusion. "Today is not my birthday," she said. "But the courier gave your name and apartment number," her husband objected. "Asher, I honestly have no idea. If they bother you, you can leave them. I can't even imagine who they could be from." Her husband was seized with anxiety, and he came to the conclusion that it was necessary to closely monitor his wife. Merely a few days after, he observed another oddity. Gianna started to linger on her phone, perpetually messaging someone. Whenever her husband inquired, she brushed off his queries by mentioning she was chatting with her girlfriends, yet oddly enough, she never parted from her phone anymore, although previously, she'd casually leave it lying around on any random table. One afternoon, driven by curiosity, Asher decided to snoop while Gianna was showering. He sifted through her phone but discovered no damning evidence. However, a peculiar detail emerged. She hadn't messaged her girlfriends in days. So, with whom had she been fervently communicating recently? Fortuitously, the mystery unraveled one evening. Gianna was busy cooking dinner in the kitchen, while Asher was sitting at the computer, immersed in reading. Suddenly, the doorbell rang. Since they weren't expecting anyone, Asher walked up to the door, a mixture of confusion and curiosity on his face. A stranger in an elegant suit stood on the threshold and held a bouquet of flowers in his hands. Asher's gaze was attracted by flowers, white lilies, exactly the same as those that the courier mistakenly delivered to their apartment not so long ago. The newcomer smiled amiably and spoke rapidly in French. Asher got the gist of it when he realized that the man was asking for permission to talk to Gianna, and oddly enough, he called Asher brother. "And who could you be?" Asher replied, recalling his long-standing studies in languages. "I'm her boyfriend," the man replied, showing a photo on his mobile device. In the picture, he and Gianna were on the beach. She was adjusting her hat, and, remarkably, her wedding ring was missing on her ring finger. Yes, my wife had a great rest in this place, the husband reflected. He called her from the kitchen, begging her to come over. It was very tempting to see how she would get out of this predicament. Gianna came out of the kitchen, wiping her hands on a towel and grumbling under her breath. She shifted her gaze to the stranger with the flowers, then slowly shifted it to her husband. "Gianna, your admirer is standing in front of you and longs for your presence," her husband announced. Obviously, the foreigner was immensely glad to see her, but the woman herself paled noticeably. When the man approached, about to hand her flowers, she instinctively stepped back. "Asher, please tell me, who is this man?" "I don't know him," she said carefully. The foreigner continued his rapid speech, pausing for a moment at the woman's hands, where he noticed the absence of the ring that had once been on them. Then his gaze shifted to Asher's hands, which allowed him to put two and two together, putting an end to his previous affability. He became extremely furious, started shouting at Gianna, and threw flowers on the floor. Unexpectedly, the woman somehow managed to calm the agitated foreigner to some extent, although her efforts were mostly in vain. When the man's anger subsided, and he continued to make a scene before finally leaving the apartment, Asher turned to his wife. She looked rather pale and confused, but she still refrained from calling the whole incident a simple misunderstanding. The reality was obvious. She had started a vacation affair. Her lover did not know that she was married, and perhaps charmed by her charm or something else, came here to surprise her. Before that, he sent her flowers and wrote letters, but Gianna had already returned to the image of a devoted wife, which made these manifestations of love seem somewhat inappropriate. Meeting her husband's gaze, she turned to him with a final request. "Asher, please forgive me. Things got out of hand. We had a drink, and he invited me to dance," she began in a slightly trembling voice. "I see now the reason you preferred texts over calls. It was Camilla who was replying to me, wasn't it?" he remarked with a touch of sarcasm. Struck by the realization, she remained silent, understanding that this approach was futile as well. "Just go, gather your belongings and leave," Asher stated icily. The sharpness in his voice took her aback. "Well, actually, I have rights to this place too," she retorted, her tone shifting from woeful to assertive. "Everything's been settled legally. You've got 10 minutes, he countered, impatiently tapping his watch. Noticing that her typically composed husband was starting to simmer with anger, Gianna knew better than to push him further. She quickly packed her essentials and exited the apartment, leaving the escalating tension behind. Asher learned from a neighbor that his wife had dashed out of their home and frantically started asking folks in the yard about the man in the suit who had recently exited from the same entrance. Clearly, she decided to take her chances with the stranger, but Asher had an inkling it wouldn't pan out for her. Despite the dismal situation, the man felt relieved to unmask his partner's real character now, rather than in another decade of marriage. Who could say how many more such strangers she might have pursued over the years?